The morning sun peeked through the stable windows at Silver Creek, casting long shadows across the hay-strewn floor. The usual cheerful sounds of nickering horses and bustling stable hands were replaced by an unusual silence. In the largest stall at the end of the barn, Thunder, a stunning black horse with a white star on his forehead, lay motionless on his side. Just 2 weeks ago, this magnificent creature had been soaring over jumps, his powerful muscles carrying him through the air with the grace of a bird. His previous owner, a kind-hearted riding instructor, had watched him grow from a spirited colt into one of the most promising show-jumping horses in the state. Thunder's gentle nature and incredible jumping ability had made him a favorite at competitions across the country. But everything changed during that foggy morning training session. The ground was a bit slippery from the previous night's rain. Thunder, always eager to please, approached the jump with his usual confidence. Nobody could have predicted what happened next: a slight misstep, a losing of balance, and then the sickening sound that would haunt the stable for weeks to come. The local vet arrived within an hour, her face growing more concerned as she examined Thunder. The stable staff gathered around, their worried whispers echoing through the barn. The initial diagnosis was devastating. A severe spinal injury had left Thunder's hind legs paralyzed. The vet explained everything in careful detail to the owner, while the stable hands listened with heavy hearts. The following days brought a parade of specialists to Silver Creek. Each one carried expensive equipment and left behind even more expensive bills. They all reached the same heartbreaking conclusion: Thunder's condition appeared permanent. The once proud horse now spent his days lying in his stall, requiring round-the-clock care just to prevent bed sores. The stable community rallied together, taking turns helping with Thunder's care. They would gently clean him, shift his position, and offer him his favorite treats, fresh carrots and apple slices. But as the days turned into weeks, the mounting medical bills became impossible to ignore. The cost of keeping him comfortable was draining the stable's resources, and the sight of his suffering weighed heavily on everyone's hearts. Late one evening, after all the other horses had been fed and the stable was quiet, the owner sat on a hay bale outside Thunder's stall, her shoulders heavy with the burden of an impossible decision. The latest medical bill lay crumpled in her hands, and tears rolled down her cheeks as she watched Thunder struggle to lift his head to eat. The vet had gently suggested that perhaps it was time to consider euthanasia, a kinder option than letting him suffer. The news spread through the stable like a shadow, casting a dark cloud over the usually cheerful atmosphere. The regular riders spoke in hushed tones, and even the other horses seemed to sense the somber mood. Thunder's stall, once a place of pride and joy, now felt like a room of sadness. But fate had other plans for Thunder, though nobody knew it yet. As the stable prepared for what they thought would be their final days with him, a tiny ray of hope was about to appear from the most unexpected source. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest observers, and help can arrive in the most surprising packages. In the corner of the stable, a little girl who took riding lessons had been watching everything unfold. While the adults were caught up in their worry and sadness, she was about to notice something that everyone else had missed, something that would change Thunder's story forever. But that's where our next chapter begins. The story continues to weave through the stable community, touching hearts and teaching lessons about hope, persistence, and the special bond between humans and animals. Each person who walks through Silver Creek's doors brings their own piece to this remarkable tale, building towards a future that none of them could have imagined during those dark early days. Among the many visitors at Silver Creek stables, there was one tiny figure who stood out from the rest. A small 6-year-old girl with wild curly hair and bright eyes would come to the stables every afternoon after school. Her mother worked as a teacher at the local elementary school, and instead of going to aftercare, the little girl would spend her afternoons at the stables where her aunt helped manage the property. Unlike the other children who came for riding lessons, this young girl had a special routine. She would pull out her favorite storybook from her purple backpack, find a quiet corner in the stable, and read out loud to the horses. Her sweet, clear voice would echo through the barn as she shared tales of magical ponies and brave stallions with her four-legged audience. The stable hands couldn't help but smile when they heard her making different voices for each character in her stories. She would wave her small hands dramatically, acting out the exciting parts, completely lost in her storytelling world. The horses seemed to enjoy her performances too. They would often turn their heads toward her voice and listen with pricked ears. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while everyone was busy with the daily stable duties, the little girl noticed something different about the big stall at the end of the barn. The usual bustle of activity around Thunder's stall had died down, and a heavy silence hung in the air. Despite the "Keep Away" sign posted on the stall door, her curiosity got the better of her. Clutching her book to her chest, she tiptoed closer to Thunder's stall. She had always admired the beautiful black horse from afar, watching him jump during competitions. Now seeing him lying there so still made her heart ache. Without thinking twice, she sat down cross-legged outside his stall and opened her book. "Hi, Thunder," she whispered. "I brought my favorite story today. It's about a horse who could fly." Her small fingers traced the words as she began reading, her voice soft and gentle. At first, Thunder didn't respond, but as she continued reading, something magical happened. His ears began to twitch at certain parts of the story. Day after day, she would return to Thunder's stall, armed with different books from her growing collection. The stable staff, touched by her dedication, pretended not to notice her breaking the "Keep Away" rule. They watched from a distance as she read story after story, sometimes even sharing her own made-up tales about brave horses who overcame great challenges. What the adults didn't notice, but the little girl did, was how Thunder's tail would sometimes swish back and forth during exciting parts of the stories. She also noticed that he would turn his head slightly whenever she showed him the pictures in her books. These tiny movements might have seemed insignificant to others, but to her young mind, they were signs of something important. She started keeping a secret diary, drawing little pictures of Thunder and marking down every movement she noticed. Her childish handwriting filled pages with observations. Thunder moved his tail during the unicorn story, and he tried to see the dragon picture today. While the grown-ups discussed medical bills and difficult decisions, she was building a case for hope. The stable had become quieter lately, with fewer lessons scheduled near Thunder's stall. But every afternoon, the sound of a child's voice reading stories provided a glimmer of normalcy in the otherwise somber atmosphere. The little girl didn't understand the complex medical terms the adults used, but she understood something far more important. Her friend Thunder was still in there, listening to every word she read. As the autumn days grew shorter and the evening feeding time came earlier, she would often beg to stay just 5 more minutes to finish a story. Her aunt would usually give in, touched by the special bond forming between the young girl and the injured horse. What nobody realized was that this bond was about to lead to an extraordinary discovery, one that would change everything. The stage was set for a moment that would prove that sometimes the most powerful observations come from the purest hearts, and that hope can be found in the most unexpected places. But for now, the little girl simply continued her daily ritual, sharing stories with a horse who had become her most faithful listener. It was an unusually chilly autumn morning at Silver Creek Stables, the kind of morning where breath turns to mist in the air and the grass crunches softly underfoot from the first frost of the season. The little girl arrived earlier than usual that day, bundled up in her favorite rainbow sweater, clutching a new book she borrowed from the school library. This wasn't just any book, it was a special one about a horse who learned to dance. She'd spotted it on the library shelf and immediately thought of Thunder. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders as she hurried down the stable aisle, eager to share her new find with her four-legged friend. The stable was quieter than normal. Most of the regular morning riders had stayed home because of the cold, and only a few stable hands were around, focusing on their morning chores. The little girl settled into her usual spot outside Thunder's stall, spreading out her worn blanket on the hay-strewn floor. "Look what I brought today," she whispered excitedly to Thunder, holding up the books so he could see the colorful cover. The horse's ears perked forward slightly, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his way of showing interest. She opened the book and began reading, her voice painting pictures of a magical world where horses could dance under the moonlight. What happened next would change everything, though it started with something so simple. As she reached the most exciting part of the story, her small hands gesturing enthusiastically, the book slipped from her grasp. It hit the concrete floor with a sharp, unexpected clap that echoed through the stable. In that split second, something extraordinary happened. Thunder, who hadn't moved his back legs in weeks, flinched and shifted away from the sudden noise. It wasn't a big movement, just a slight tensing of muscles and a small shift of his hindquarters, but it was movement nonetheless. The little girl froze, her eyes wide with wonder. "You moved," she gasped, scrambling to her feet. "You moved your legs." Her voice echoed through the stable, drawing the attention of a nearby stable hand who was sweeping the aisle. The young man hurried over, concerned by her sudden outburst. "What's wrong?" he asked, expecting to find the little girl upset or hurt. Instead, he found her jumping up and down with excitement, pointing at Thunder's stall. He moved his back legs," she exclaimed, her words tumbling out in a rush. The book fell and made a loud noise, and he moved away from it. "He's not really paralyzed, he's just stuck." The stable hand looked skeptical at first, but something in the little girl's certainty made him pause. He'd been working with horses long enough to know that sometimes the smallest signs could mean the biggest things. "Show me," he said, kneeling down to her level. The little girl picked up her book and, after a moment's hesitation, dropped it again. Once more, Thunder showed that slight response, a minimal but definite reaction in his hindquarters. The stable hand's eyes widened. He'd been helping care for Thunder for weeks, and this was the first sign of reflexive movement he'd seen. Without wasting a moment, he rushed to call the stable owner and the veterinarian. The little girl stayed by Thunder's stall, her hand reached through the bars, gently talking to him. "See," she whispered, "I knew you weren't broken. You were just scared and needed time." Within an hour, the stable was buzzing with activity. The veterinarian arrived, along with the stable owner and several other staff members. They gathered around Thunder's stall, watching intently as the little girl demonstrated her discovery again and again. Each time, Thunder showed that same small but crucial response. The veterinarian's face grew thoughtful as she conducted a new series of tests. She pressed various points along Thunder's spine, watching carefully for reactions. To everyone's amazement, there were small responses they hadn't noticed before, tiny movements that had been overlooked in their focus on the bigger picture. As the adults discussed what this might mean, the little girl sat quietly with her book, occasionally glancing at Thunder with a knowing smile. She might not have understood the big medical words they were using, but she understood something more important. Sometimes the biggest discoveries come from simply paying attention to the little things. The autumn sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the frost-covered grounds outside, while inside the stable, a spark of hope had been ignited. This discovery would lead to a complete reassessment of Thunder's condition, opening doors to possibilities that nobody had considered before. But for now, the little girl simply went back to reading her story, picking up right where she'd left off, as if she'd known all along that this was just another chapter in Thunder's journey to recovery. Word spread quickly through the local horse community about the little girl's discovery at Silver Creek Stables. Within days, a specialized equine neurologist arrived from a renowned veterinary hospital 3 states away. She brought with her the latest equipment and, more importantly, a fresh perspective on Thunder's condition. The autumn morning of the neurologist's first examination was filled with nervous energy. The stable hands had cleaned Thunder's stall until it sparkled, and everyone spoke in hushed voices as they watched the doctor work. The little girl sat on her usual blanket nearby, clutching her storybook tightly to her chest, hardly daring to breathe as she watched. The examination took hours. The neurologist used strange-looking instruments and performed dozens of small tests, many similar to what the little girl had accidentally discovered. She pressed different points along Thunder's spine, watched his reactions to various stimuli, and took countless notes on her tablet. The little girl noticed how the doctor's eyes lit up several times during the examination, the same way her own teacher's eyes did when students gave the right answers in class. Finally, the neurologist gathered everyone in the stable office. The little girl was invited too, after the stable owner insisted that she deserved to hear the findings firsthand. Sitting on a hay bale, her feet dangling above the ground, she listened intently as the doctor explained her discoveries using simple words that everyone could understand. "What we're dealing with isn't complete paralysis," the neurologist explained, showing everyone a diagram of a horse's spine on her tablet. Thunder has severe inflammation pressing on his spinal cord, almost like a big bruise that hasn't had a chance to heal properly. The good news is that this type of injury might respond to treatment. The stable owner's eyes filled with tears of hope. "But why didn't we see this before?" she asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. The neurologist smiled, gesturing toward the little girl. Sometimes we focus so much on the big picture that we miss the small signs. Your young friend here noticed something crucial. Thunder still has some reflex responses. That tells us the nerve pathways aren't completely damaged. She then laid out a treatment plan that sounded both promising and challenging. It would involve a combination of new anti-inflammatory medications, specialized physical therapy, and alternative treatments like acupuncture. The little girl's eyes grew wide when the doctor mentioned using underwater treadmills and special equipment to help Thunder regain his strength. Think of it like when you hurt your knee, the neurologist explained directly to the little girl, and you need to do special exercises to make it strong again. Thunder needs the same kind of help, just a lot more of it. The cost of the treatment would be substantial, and the recovery process would take months, with no guarantee of success. But compared to the alternative they'd been facing just days ago, everyone agreed it was worth trying. The stable owner immediately began making calls to horse rescue organizations and local businesses to help raise funds for Thunder's treatment. That afternoon, the stable turned into a hub of activity. People came and went, making plans and arrangements. Someone started a social media fundraising campaign, while others began organizing benefit horse shows and auctions. The local feed store offered to donate supplies, and a therapy equipment company agreed to loan some of their specialized machinery. Through all the excitement, the little girl continued her daily routine of reading to Thunder. The neurologist noticed this and suggested incorporating story time into Thunder's treatment schedule, explaining how staying calm and relaxed could help his healing process. The little girl beamed with pride when she was officially made part of Thunder's medical team. The veterinary staff taught her how to recognize signs of progress and pain in horses. She started keeping a proper medical diary, replacing her crayon drawings with careful notes about Thunder's daily movements and responses. Her schoolteacher, hearing about the situation, even allowed her to do a special project about horse therapy for her science class. As the sun set on that transformative day, the stable hummed with renewed purpose. Equipment catalogs lay open on hay bales, treatment schedules were being drawn up, and volunteer lists were filling up quickly. The atmosphere had completely changed from just a week ago, where there had been sadness. Now there was determination and hope. The little girl was the last to leave that evening, giving Thunder an extra pat through the stall bars. "Tomorrow I'll bring a new book," she promised him softly. "It's about a horse who climbed mountains. I think you'll like it because you're going to climb your own mountain now." As she walked away with her aunt, her small hand waving goodbye to Thunder, nobody could have predicted just how right she would turn out to be. The journey ahead would be long and challenging, but something extraordinary had already happened. A child's simple act of attention had opened the door to possibilities that would change not just Thunder's life, but the entire stable community. The first month of Thunder's treatment felt like watching grass grow, slow, requiring patience, but with tiny signs of life appearing day by day. The stable had transformed part of the indoor riding arena into a rehabilitation space, complete with soft rubber mats and specialized equipment. The little girl dubbed it Thunder's Gym, and the name stuck. Every morning began with the same routine. The physical therapist would arrive early, armed with heating pads and massage tools. Thunder would receive a gentle warm-up massage to prepare his muscles for the day's exercises. The stable hands had learned to recognize the horse's different moods. Some days he seemed eager to work, while other days required extra encouragement and plenty of carrot treats. The underwater treadmill sessions proved to be the most challenging yet promising part of Thunder's therapy. The first time they tried to load him into this strange-looking machine, he refused to move forward. That's when the little girl had an idea. She stood at the front of the treadmill and began reading from her book about the horse who climbed mountains. Thunder's ears perked forward, and slowly, carefully, he followed her voice into the machine. Soon, this became their special routine. 3 times a week, she would perch on a safe spot near the treadmill, reading story after story while Thunder walked in the warm water. The physical therapist noticed that Thunder worked harder and longer when the little girl was there, as if he was trying to walk toward the next page of the story. The stable community rallied around Thunder's recovery in ways nobody expected. A retired carpenter built a special support sling that could help Thunder practice standing. Local children held a bake sale that raised enough money to buy a month's worth of medications. Even the grumpy old farmer next door started dropping off fresh hay, refusing any payment. Progress came in tiny victories. The first time Thunder managed to stand on his own for more than a minute, the entire stable erupted in cheers. When he took his first wobbly steps without the support sling, the little girl ran around the stable yard telling everyone she met, including a very confused delivery man who had no idea what was going on but congratulated her anyway. There were setbacks too. Some days Thunder's legs would tremble so badly he could barely stand. Other days, the pain would make him irritable and unwilling to try. During these tough times, the little girl would sit outside his stall and talk to him about school, about her day, about anything and everything. The stable owner noticed that Thunder's breathing would calm and his muscles would relax as he listened to her cheerful chatter. The fundraising efforts continued throughout the months. The stable hosted a special event called Thunder's Lightning Fast Recovery Race, where local riders participated in a friendly competition. Everyone wore blue ribbons, Thunder's competition color from his jumping days. The little girl set up a storytelling booth where she read horse stories to children for donations, proudly adding her earnings to Thunder's treatment fund. As autumn turned to winter, they had to adapt the therapy sessions. The stable staff installed heat lamps near Thunder's exercise area, and someone donated a huge heated blanket to keep him warm during his rest periods. The little girl started wearing her puffy winter coat and mittens, but she never missed a therapy session. She would sit on her blanket, now accompanied by a thermos of hot chocolate, reading story after story while Thunder worked on his exercises. The physical therapist began incorporating new challenges into Thunder's routine. They created an obstacle course of soft poles on the ground for him to step over, helping him relearn how to lift his feet properly. The little girl would draw pictures of each new achievement and pin them to a special progress board outside his stall. One particularly cold morning, something remarkable happened. During his therapy session, Thunder did something he hadn't done since his injury. He tried to play. While walking on the treadmill, he reached over and gently tugged on the little girl's winter hat with his lips, just like he used to do with his riding equipment in his show jumping days. The physical therapist had tears in her eyes as she recorded this playful behavior in her notes. The local newspaper ran a story about Thunder's recovery, featuring a photo of him standing proudly beside the little girl with her storybook. The article talked about the power of community, hope, and the special bond between a child and a horse. But more importantly, it showed everyone that sometimes the best medicine isn't found in bottles or machines. Sometimes it's found in the simple act of not giving up. As the winter days grew shorter, Thunder's progress continued to illuminate the darkness. Each small step forward was a victory, each moment of strength a triumph. The road ahead was still long, but now it was lit with hope, warmed by community spirit, and paved with the unwavering belief of a little girl who simply refused to stop reading stories to her favorite horse. As winter melted into spring at Silver Creek Stables, Thunder's rehabilitation entered an exciting new phase. The indoor arena, which had served as his recovery gym through the cold months, now opened its doors to let in fresh spring breezes. The little girl noticed how Thunder would stretch his neck toward the open doors, breathing in the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. One particularly memorable morning, the physical therapist announced it was time to try something new. They would attempt to let Thunder walk in the small outdoor paddock without any support equipment. The stable staff gathered around the fence, trying to hide their nervous excitement. The little girl sat on the bottom rail, her new spring shoes dangling as she clutched her latest storybook. The moment the stable hands led Thunder out into the sunshine was breathtaking. At first, he stood completely still, blinking in the bright light. Then, slowly but surely, he took one step forward, then another. His legs trembled slightly, but they held firm. The little girl began reading from her book, her clear voice carrying across the paddock. Thunder's ears swiveled toward her, and he carefully made his way in her direction. "Look how straight he's walking," whispered one of the stable hands, pointing at Thunder's improving gait. The physical therapist nodded, taking videos on her tablet to document his progress. Gone were the severely wobbly steps from a few months ago. Though still not perfect, Thunder's movements showed remarkable improvement. The stable had developed a new daily routine. Every morning, Thunder would have his therapy sessions, followed by short walks in the paddock. In the afternoon, when the little girl arrived after school, they would have what she called their training and story time. She would sit on a chair outside the paddock, reading adventure stories while Thunder practiced walking in circles and figure eights. One afternoon, something unexpected happened that had everyone rushing to the paddock. The little girl had been reading a particularly exciting story about a wild horse running through mountains when Thunder did something amazing. He tried to trot. It was just a few bouncy steps, more of a quick walk than a proper trot, but it was something they hadn't seen him do since before his injury. The stable owner captured the moment on her phone, and the video quickly spread through the local horse community. Messages of support and encouragement poured in from people who had been following Thunder's journey. The local tack shop even donated a beautiful new halter with Thunder's name embroidered on it to celebrate this milestone. Spring brought more opportunities for recovery. The physical therapist introduced new exercises, including walking over ground poles set in patterns. At first, Thunder would carefully step over each pole, sometimes bumping them with his hooves. But with practice and patience, his coordination improved dramatically. The little girl drew chalk marks in the dirt to track how many poles he could step over without touching them, and the number grew higher every week. The stable's riding students became involved in Thunder's recovery too. They would take turns helping to groom him, carefully brushing his coat until it gleamed in the sunlight. Thunder seemed to enjoy the attention, often nickering softly when he heard young voices approaching his paddock. The physical therapist explained that this social interaction was just as important for his recovery as the physical exercises. One of the most touching developments came from the little girl's school. Her class had been learning about writing letters, and her teacher suggested they write to Thunder. Soon, colorful envelopes started arriving at the stable, filled with children's drawings and simple messages of encouragement. The stable staff pinned them all on a special board near Thunder's stall, creating a wall of hope and support. As spring progressed, Thunder's strength continued to build. He could now stand for longer periods and walk for greater distances. The physical therapist started incorporating gentle slopes into his walking routine, helping him build muscle strength. Though he would never return to jumping competitions, everyone agreed that his progress was nothing short of miraculous. The little girl, now known throughout the stable as Thunder's unofficial rehabilitation assistant, took her role very seriously. She kept a detailed diary of his progress, complete with drawings and stickers. When the physical therapist needed Thunder to try something new, she would often ask the little girl to read during the attempt, knowing that her voice helped keep him calm and focused. As the days grew longer and warmer, the stable buzzed with excitement about Thunder's achievements. Each small step forward was celebrated, each new movement cherished. The story of the paralyzed horse who learned to walk again, inspired by a child's unwavering faith and supported by an entire community, was becoming something of a legend in the local horse world. But perhaps the most beautiful sight of all was watching Thunder follow the little girl as she walked along the paddock fence, her voice carrying tales of adventure while his hooves made steady, confident steps in the spring grass. It was a picture of pure trust, hope, and the extraordinary power of believing in someone, even when everyone else might have given up. As the days grew longer and warmer, the stable buzzed with excitement about Thunder's achievements. Each small step forward was celebrated, each new movement cherished. The story of the paralyzed horse who learned to walk again, inspired by a child's unwavering faith and supported by an entire community, was becoming something of a legend in the local horse world. But perhaps the most beautiful sight of all was watching Thunder follow the little girl as she walked along the paddock fence, her voice carrying tales of adventure while his hooves made steady, confident steps in the spring grown year after that fateful morning when Thunder's injury changed everything. Silver Creek Stables hosted a very special celebration. The morning sun painted the sky in beautiful shades of pink and gold as cars filled the parking area. People from all over the region came to witness what many had called the miracle at Silver Creek. The stable was decorated with blue ribbons. Thunder's old competition color and hand-drawn pictures from local children covered the walls. The little girl, now 7 years old, stood proudly near the paddock fence in her favorite dress, her curly hair tied back with a ribbon that matched Thunder's new halter. She held her very first storybook, the one that had started it all, close to her heart. Thunder stood in the paddock, his black coat gleaming in the sunlight. Gone was the frightened, injured horse who couldn't move his back legs. In his place stood a proud, gentle giant who had defied all odds. Though he would never jump again, he had gained something far more valuable, a new purpose that nobody could have predicted. The stable owner stepped forward to address the gathered crowd. She told the story of Thunder's journey, from those dark days when they thought they would lose him, to the moment when a little girl's observant heart noticed something everyone else had missed. As she spoke, Thunder walked steadily around the paddock, stopping occasionally to nuzzle the little girl's shoulder through the fence. But the real surprise came next. The stable owner announced that Thunder would become Silver Creek's first therapy horse. The veterinarians had agreed that while he couldn't return to jumping, his gentle nature and remarkable recovery story made him perfect for working with children who faced their own challenges. The little girl's eyes grew wide with excitement as the stable owner explained how Thunder would help children with disabilities learn to ride, build confidence, and find joy in connecting with horses. Just as reading stories had helped Thunder heal, now he would help others write their own stories of hope and recovery. To demonstrate Thunder's new calling, they invited a young boy who used a wheelchair to meet him. The boy's parents had heard about Thunder's story and reached out to the stable, hoping that their son might benefit from spending time with a horse who understood what it meant to overcome physical challenges. Everyone watched in touched silence as Thunder gently lowered his head to the boy's eye level, his ears forward with interest. The little girl stepped forward and showed the boy how to offer Thunder a carrot, just as she had done so many times during his recovery. The pure joy on the boy's face as Thunder carefully took the treat from his hand brought tears to many eyes. That afternoon, the stable hosted an open house where people could learn about their new therapy program. The little girl, now an expert at telling Thunder's story, led small groups around the stable. She showed them the progress board, covered with her drawings, the special equipment that had helped Thunder learn to walk again, and the wall of letters from children all over the country who had been inspired by his journey. The physical therapist had prepared a video showing Thunder's recovery journey, from those first tiny movements to his current steady walk. Watching the progression brought home just how far he had come. But perhaps more touching were the interviews with stable staff, volunteers, and community members who had been part of his recovery. Each person spoke about how helping Thunder had changed their own lives in unexpected ways. As the day went on, Thunder gave short demonstrations of his new therapy work. He walked calmly beside children who needed support, patiently stood still for those who needed extra time to pet him, and seemed to know instinctively when someone needed gentle encouragement. The stable's therapy program already had a waiting list of families hoping to work with him. The little girl had her own special moment in the spotlight too. The local library had helped her write and illustrate a small book about Thunder's story, which they would keep in their children's section. She read it aloud to the gathered crowd, her voice clear and confident, while Thunder stood nearby, listening just as he had done through all those months of recovery. As the celebration drew to a close, the stable owner revealed one final surprise. They had created a scholarship in Thunder's name, which would help children from families in need access the therapy program. The first recipient would be the young boy in the wheelchair, who had already formed such a special bond with Thunder. The setting sun cast long shadows across the paddock as the last visitors departed. The little girl stayed behind to give Thunder his evening treat and read him one last story. As she read, other horses in the stable nickered softly, and the evening breeze carried the sweet scent of hay and hope through the air. Thunder's story had come full circle, from a champion show jumper to a paralyzed horse facing a stud end, to a beacon of hope for children facing their own challenges. But perhaps the most beautiful part of his story was how it proved that sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from medicine or machines, but from the pure, unwavering faith of a child who simply refused to give up on a friend. As darkness fell, the stable settled into its nighttime routine. Thunder stood contentedly in his stall, his ears still perked toward the little girl as she gathered her books to leave. "See you tomorrow," she whispered, just as she had done every day for the past year. And as she walked away, her small hand waving goodbye, everyone knew that this wasn't the end of Thunder's story, it was just the beginning of a whole new chapter. It was a picture of pure trust, hope, and the extraordinary power of believing in someone, even when everyone else might have given up.